our next panel, as we start, Hope Bohanec is the author of the book The Ultimate Betrayal. Will Tuttle is the author of the book The World Peace Diet, and David Simon is the author of the book Mutilations. And our topic that we are talking about is where your food comes from. So, Factory Farms, the truth about where your food comes from. So, the first question I guess I'd like to ask is, are we supposed to talk about this? This seems like a topic that doesn't come up that much around the dinner table. Friends don't encourage me to go into detail. Are we supposed to avoid this, smile and say everything is, don't worry about it, I'm sure it's fine? I mean, are we supposed to have this conversation, or are we supposed to even talk about it in public? What's your thought?
Yeah, I think that, the problem, of course, is that we live in a society where people would much rather not think about the violence to animals that is occurring because of their choice to eat animal-sourced foods. And that's why it's very important for us, I think, to talk about it and to bring this message to the world. In some ways, there's this great quote attributed to, something that Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote. He said, "People long to be settled. Only to the degree that they are unsettled is there any hope for them." And I think in some ways, I think, at least from myself anyway, I see my job as upsetting people and making people uncomfortable. And I don't like to do that necessarily, but I think that the enormous amount of violence towards animals, the abuse of ecosystems, the suffering that's being caused, as well as the enormous opportunity that we have to transform our society, requires us to bring this message to people. So I think the question really is how we do it, how we bring this message, how much depth can we bring to the message, and also, of course, from my point of view, it's very important to be a spokesperson for the animals who really don't have a spokesperson if we don't speak up for them, and to speak in ways that people can hear, so that we're not doing it in ways that people are just going to shut us down. And I think that's what really takes some refining to develop the capacity to do that.
It's an interesting question, and of course the answer is yes, we should absolutely be talking about this. And I think Will touched on that. The question really is kind of how should we be talking about this? Because it's critical that we talk about it. We need to be messengers in our own lives to our family, friends, our online community, however it is that you can influence is absolutely important. And I think it's, food issues, it's really interesting how this is such a touchy subject. People are so, they're so defensive about this. And I don't know, I often think of a dog that's food possessive, and you try to take their food away, and they're, we kind of have that as a society. We don't want that our 3 meals a day are very sacred to us, and we want our cheeseburgers, and we want our, our cheese and milkshakes and omelets and all that. We don't want to have to think that that's causing suffering of animals and causing environmental degradation. People just don't want to hear it. But it's critical that they do. And so how do we get that information out? I think that something that's happened is that now vegans often are kind of like apologetic vegans now. Feel like we have to be so careful and so sensitive, and someone's gonna get upset, and I don't want to rock the boat. Well, you know what? We've got to rock the boat to a point, and of course we want to be heard. So I don't mean to be mean or yelling or anything like that, but but these issues need to be brought up, and people need to be challenged on them. And and I think it's very important that we do speak up whenever we can and however we can, and kind of get out of our comfort zone a little, perhaps, and find the best ways to talk about this, because we've got to get the information out there, and don't be apologetic about it. I often say that the best way is to talk about your experience instead of saying you should do this. I'm vegan because it's very important to the animals, to the environment, whatever it is. We've got to find those ways that will be heard, but we've got to get the information out there. So.
There are about 10 billion, give or take, land animals killed for food in this country each year. And during the roughly hour and a half that we're going to be talking, more than 1 million animals will be killed. Where are all these animals? You can go outside and look around, you're not going to see any of them. You definitely won't see any chickens or pigs. You might see some cows grazing somewhere. With roughly 315 million people in this country, if you do the math, kind of rough, back of the napkin, there's about 30 animals per person killed for food each year in this country. And imagine if every omnivore had 30 animals traveling around with him or her all the time, like a cow, 2 pigs, and 27 chickens. That would really put this in perspective, seeing those animals. But we never see them. Why? Because 98 to 99% of them spend their lives in factory farms. There are 19,000 factory farms in this country, and that's where, statistically speaking, virtually all of our animal foods come from. It's important for us to not forget that that's the case, and to remember that simply because we can't see the animals that are being eaten doesn't mean that they're not spending their lives suffering. And that's what we're going to talk about during this panel, I think.
And also, I just want to add to that beautiful image you had, David. There's probably, besides those 30, how many, 30 or so animals, another 70 or maybe even more water animals that would be swimming around you as well. So we have a gigantic impact on animals, hundreds, thousands, directly. And this is basically, people, in a sense, don't want to be reminded of this, because I think deep down we all have a good heart. One of the things that I just want to mention briefly, I think is very important, and maybe I'll mention it again later, is that to remind people that the only reason we're eating animal foods is because of the culture that we're born into. That we're born into communities where that's what people do. And I've talked about this all over the world, and I've never found anyone who disagreed with that. Even in the cornfields of Iowa, I remember talking and telling a bunch of ranchers, the only reason anyone eats meat and dairy is because of the families they're raised in, the communities they're raised in, and they said, yep, that's true. And so we're just basically following a script. It's kind of a tribal thing. It's like we're born into this tribe, and that's what the tribe eats. And as vegans, really, it's kind of a major leap to eat a different food, right? It's kind of like leaving the tribe. And I think a lot of people at a deep level are afraid to leave the tribe at a very sort of pre-conscious level. And so when we come along and we talk about the importance of being conscious about our food, they would rather be unconscious and be part of the tribe than to be conscious and sort of leave the tribe. And yet, leaving the tribe, we actually are part. We find we're part. That's why I'm glad Charlie Berman's mentioned the idea. We have the vegetarians of Central Florida. We have many other groups. We have many other online groups. We're creating alternative tribes, essentially tribes based on sanity, compassion, sustainability, freedom, health, justice, and so forth. And that these tribes, these communities, really are the seed of the future. If we're going to have a future, these are the seed communities of the future, to be aware of the issues that we're talking about here in these panels.